Well, welcome back. Now, while the pandemic and lockdown is very much front of mind to all of us in the hospitality industry, other challenges are looming on the near horizon, mainly in the shape of Brexit and trade deals, and particularly the threat they pose to our food producers, manufacturers, and the whole supply chain. So what's happening at the other end of the farm to fork journey with our core food producers, British farmers? Well, I'm delighted that my next guest is the charismatic, I say, and certainly influential president of the National Farmers Union, Minette Bathurst. Hi, Minette. Welcome to the Big Peach 2020 Digital Experience. We're here in London. I think you're on your farm in Wiltshire at the moment. Is that right?
I am, that's right, yes. Very envious of you.
Well, I don't know. Being out in the country is always good. Actually, give us a bit of background, because the point is you are a working farmer. I mean, you are the face of British farmers at the moment, but tell us a bit about your farm.
Well, I'm a tenant farmer here in South Wiltshire, so we're farming near Salisbury. We're also very diversified, Bridge, as well. So we're 100 cow beef suckler herd, a few pedigree sheep, an arable rotation that works around the farm. But I also run a wedding venue. My background is very much in catering. I trained as a chef many years ago. And, you know, my heartfelt condolences to your amazing sector, because, you know, we and all our suppliers have been suffering as well. I mean, it's been horrendous for caterers that, you know, are here every week of the year, and I think we're all in it together, and it's been very tough times. But I really hope that on the back of this, the links between my sector and out of home actually are much closer. We've always had a close relationship, but wouldn't it be great if there was legacy from the glassy pandemic that we've been living with?
I think that's one of the things we want to explore today. And as you say, obviously, you know, hospitality is hit, and obviously part of your business, but obviously agriculture is functioning, but nonetheless, because of obviously the lockdowns, particularly the effect on food service, how has the pandemic and the restrictions affected agriculture in general?
It's been a story of two halves, really. You know, without doubt, the loss of the out-of-home market in the initial lockdown, that obviously is still reeling again now. We are back in lockdown again. That created enormous disturbance and enormous economic shock, both for growers, you know, supplying ornamentals, trees into garden centres, to dairy farmers who are supplying out of home. You know, your lockdown coffee at home is not your coffee that you have when we're out, and you know, it tends to be a bit of Nescafe and a splash of milk, and that's just not the same. So there was huge impact for that sector, specialist cheesemakers, all those that are supplying into food service and out of home in general. The impacts have been savage. You know, we saw the potato market literally sort of fall off a cliff, you know, with the closure of fish and chip shops. And yet retail, of course, you know, has been selling more, and meat sales are up. We had a lot of problems with carcass balance in the beginning, but you know, things are better now. But we couldn't, I think the big thing for our sector was that we couldn't mothball our businesses, we couldn't furlough our workers or our livestock. So we had, you know, dealing with perishable supply chains, we had to keep going. And you know, the fact that we've got those supply chains that are well invested in meant that, you know, outfits like McDonald's in the food service sector, you know, I think they really felt that huge investment that they've made over many years now in UK and Ireland was very well placed, because it allowed them to just come back online again.
Yeah, because obviously you mentioned that relationship with sort of food service, well, food supplies in general, and British agriculture. Obviously, the thing looming on the horizon, which you'll spend a lot more time, and I think we've probably been a bit distracted in hospitality, is Brexit, which is not far away. I mean, that certainly one of the things at the top of your agenda, if not the very top. Give us a sense, because you know, like a lot of industries, you know, you've got members who voted for Brexit, ones that didn't, but certainly as an industry, what are your main concerns about where we are at the moment, particularly with the uncertainty about whether we get a deal or not?
I think for all of us, everything sort of hinges around what will be the future relationship with Europe. It's a critical market for imports. It's a critical market for exports. It's a critical market for supplies in general, and particularly for my sector with vet meds, chemicals, fertilizers, a lot of which is produced in the EU. It's in both sides' economic interest that we get that deal. So everything starts with Europe, and of course here we are, so close to end of transition. No more idea as to what that deal will look like, indeed whether there will be a deal. So I think that is sending shockwaves through everybody at the moment, and it doesn't bear thinking about leaving without a deal as to the further damage it will do to the food and farming sector.
I mean, what are you hoping for? What's the best you could expect out of this? I.e., a deal, but what would it look like? I mean, perhaps we are in fantasy world a bit here at the moment, but it's probably getting a sense of where you're going and some of those issues. I mean, you mentioned the whole thing about fertilizer and other things. It's not just food; it's your infrastructure. But are there things you think you're really going to need to make this work?
Look, I think there are. I think the chances are, that the deal is going to be a thin deal, and it probably is going to create friction. And of course, when you get friction, you get added cost, and none of us want to see any more cost burden on any level of the chain. It just will not tolerate it. We all work in a very, very pressurized marketplace with no margin in it at all, very little margin, and a lot of pressure points. So at least if we leave with a deal, it will allow us to then progress to a better deal. I think the big worry for everybody is the thought of leaving, without any deal at all, and that will deliver change at pace. I mean, if I take the lamb sector as an example, we are 40% goes into the EU market. We're still going to have the same tariff rate quota of lamb coming into our market from the EU. So loss of that market into the European Union, it's going to take time to open up other markets.
Because obviously,
very vulnerable.
Obviously, the Secretary of State was on Andrew Marr. A lot of us heard him basically talking about transitioning from lamb to beef. Doesn't sound that easy, and he's a farmer, isn't he? So he ought to know better. But what did you think of that?
It's fair to say it did not land well. When you are the second largest producer of sheep meat in the world, which the UK is, and you've been reliably assured for 4 years that we will get a deal and there won't be anything to worry about, to suddenly be told a month from leaving that you can change over and go into beef, landed very, very badly with sheep farmers right across the country, and understandably so. My counterpart in Wales, John Davis, spoke to George Eustice last night, and NFU Scotland have written in as well. So I think people are very concerned. It's a very tense time, and I don't know. None of us know. If anybody says, "Look, we know what it's going to look like," there'll definitely be this deal. Nobody knows. That's the point.
Of course, the other area you're lobbying on quite strongly, and it's linked, is potential trade deals, particularly with the US. How's that progressing? Because obviously within that, there's been a big focus on animal welfare standards. I mean, we'll come on to talk about the Trade and Agriculture Commission in a minute. But in terms of that general push, what are you after there, and what's the reaction you're getting from the government at the moment?
If I'm honest, this has been quite a long and torturous journey. So my focus has been getting the government to honour its commitment, whereby in the 2019 manifesto, they said that trade deals would not undermine our farmers. So the question that I've always been asking is, well, what does that look like, and how? So there is serious threat to our farmers, because we have, of course, very high cost of regulation in this country about how we keep our animals. We have all sorts of rules in place. If we take poultry as an example, 16% of those costs for poultry producers at the moment are driven by EU legislation, which of course is about the number of birds that you keep in a building. It's about vet med oversight. It's about the amount of light And all of that has a cost to it. And the US is a really good case in point, because not in all states, but in many states, you have no legislation whatsoever. So you can put as many birds in as possible. You don't have to have any light. You don't have to have any biosecurity, which of course is why you chemical wash it at the end. And that is scientifically safe. It's perfectly safe to eat. That's not the issue. My issue has always been, we insist that our farmers abide by these rules. And these rules cost money. That 16% of costs, that just doesn't go away. And if you can take out 16% of costs by bringing in poultry meat that hasn't had to go through that process and abide by those rules, you undercut our market. And that is the challenge. And all we are saying is, in trade deals, we want to make sure there is a common approach, and that we maintain our strong position on animal welfare and environmental protection. And actually, we aim to influence the WTO. So that's been the focus all along. And it's very frustrating when it's sort of played out as a protectionist approach.
Yeah.
We have the same, effectively with financial services, with the car industry, with aerospace. We have rules that we want our regulators to abide by, and it is no different with food. But you've got these complexities around values and procedure, if you like, as opposed to safety. And of course, they are two completely separate things.
But what you have had in the last week, really, or week or so, is one, the agricultural bill has become the Agricultural Act, it's passed through Parliament, and also the Trade and Agriculture Commission, which has been strengthened to allow basically Parliament to have more scrutiny on it. And dare I say, I know a lot of the audience today, that obviously Kate Nicholls has been co-chairing some of today. Unfortunately, she, like you, has to spend time on calls to ministers, which is exactly what she's doing now. But obviously she's on that commission as well. But in a sense, has that been a good victory for you? Is it gone a fair way to giving you the reassurance you want from government?
Well, look, just to mention Kate very briefly, I mean, she's been a phenomenal ally to us. I do think we've worked very well and very closely together for the last 4 years. And I think that is something that we need to build on going forward. So I was delighted that she was put on the original TAC, the original Trade Agricultural Commission. And of course, that's where this all started, effectively, that Liz Truss recognised that it was needed. But the one that Kate currently sits on is in place for 6 months. We'll produce a report that goes to Parliament, but that was going to be it. What we have in place now is an agreement that the TAC will go on the face of the trade bill, and that the amendment in the agricultural bill will mean that what it does, the TAC does, can actually be reported to Parliament 21 days before ratification. Just remember that the Japan deal never saw the light of day in Parliament. Our focus has been making sure these trade deals, that our MPs representing each and every one of us, our MPs can represent us and their voice will be heard. That mechanism is in place now, but it wasn't before. Yeah.
In terms of the government, then, how do you sort of characterise your effectiveness with the government? Do you think you've done well? Do you have a cordial relationship, or is it fairly combative?
It's been a journey. I think it's had some choppy periods, if I'm honest. I think, look, when we got this coalition together of Jamie Oliver, of Joe Wicks, of every environmental NGO, of all farming organisations. We had a whole chain coalition that has never ever come together before. And then we got 1 million people signing a petition in a 2-week period. We put something quite clever in place in the meantime, that if you signed the petition, you could then become an active supporter of backing British farming. In one weekend, we saw 500,000 people become an active supporter. Yeah. When you did that, you could then email your MP. So we then also saw 80,000 emails land in MPs' inboxes. It wasn't a popular move. I can remember getting a text from my MP saying, "Is this you?" But ultimately, that is what has led to change. And we always knew that government had to get ahead of this. So it was about getting to see the Prime Minister and saying, right, look, there's an oven-ready solution here. There is something that can take this off your desk. This is what you need to do. And ultimately, that was what happened, because what you can't do with a majority government is to force them effectively into, they will always whip against you. So they had to take ownership of this, which is exactly what they did. And I think both sides are happy. Obviously, for some people, it doesn't go far enough. It's not a binary enough approach. But if you're working with a majority government of 80, they hold the power base. So it has to be about a coming together. That's the only way it can work.
Well, there's two threads there. One, we'll come on to hospitality and a relationship, but also let's talk about the public, because that's what you've done. How important do you believe that having public opinion, or at least a large swathe of public opinion on your side, has been in getting the wins you've got?
It's been everything. Public opinion really matters, and it's living proof that what the public think, what the public want. We've seen it to a certain extent with what Rashford has done. It matters. So I think public support is everything. And what I think is great is that the public have been a growing commitment to British sourcing. We're seeing it really, I think, play out now in hospitality, that people are thinking about their health. They are wanting to buy local. They are wanting to know about the production standards of the food that they are eating. We're seeing a whole different driver. And that, for me, was what was exciting about the chefs getting involved, because with my background very much being in that area, a frustration of mine has always been from the chefs that the link between the food that is on the plate and the production and the story and the provenance that goes with it, that hasn't come together. And I think that has been the game changer. And I think that's where there is enormous opportunity for us going forwards, that, the more we can use our own raw ingredients here, the more it supports our economy, the more it helps, when leveling up for me is not about north versus south, it's leveling up across the whole country. The hospitality sector is got a chance to be vibrant in every corner of this country, and that's what we want to see.
I mean, I think what you say is absolutely true. I mean, all the research we've got from CGA here points to that, certainly before the pandemic, and it continued through, because health in a general sense is very much front of mind. It's not just avoiding catching the virus, it is being healthier and fitter, and the whole local thing has come through very strongly. So let's move to hospitality as well. I mean, I think perhaps, obviously you work with Kate. Hospitality is at least 40-45% of sort of food sold in the country. But I think there's perhaps a feeling in hospitality that the NFU has probably not engaged as much with hospitality, because retailers are easier, because you know who the big supermarket chains are, and that's where you play. What would you say to that criticism, and what would you like to see from a relationship?
So it's been an enormous frustration of mine, and I've never totally understood it. For me, out of home, is an incredibly important market. Out of home and procurement are two very, very important markets, and together they are over half the value of the food market in this country. So why would we not engage? Bizarrely, my members are always focused on retail. It's always about retail, because I think they can touch and feel retail. If they see this commingling, or they see a retailer changes their sourcing policy, they can see it. And for some reason, people don't put the same energy into out of home. And also, I think out of home is complex. We've got a lot of food service and others who have been really using it as a point of difference, as brand recognition. But we need, and I'm very keen that we do get much closer to out of home and to procurement, and that we can provide the linkage, if you like. So it's very important to me that we drive those changes.
Is the Buy British angle your main driver on that, and how do you get people to, say, in hospitality, in pubs, restaurants, fast food chains, to actually do more to buy British?
I think it's got to be about more than buy British. It's got to be about the values that underpin us effectively. I think we are going to see real drivers on health, people wanting to engage with the raw ingredients that are in their food. So I think, we need more than just sitting under the Union Jack. And at the end of the day, out of home is a challenging area, ever more so now for what it's going through.
Absolutely.
So we've got to be able to provide good value. I think there are too many conversations effectively about a sort of two-tier food system. My focus has always been on producing, the highest quality, affordable food for every single person in this country, regardless of what budget they are on. And I think that's just as applicable to out of home. The last thing that I want to see is a marketplace whereby effectively we're saying, coded language here, that I don't particularly like, but, people who are earning a lot of money, people who can afford it, they can have high quality British food, and then it almost seems like, we'll have cheap imported food for everybody else. That is disastrous. We've got the most affordable food here that exists in the entire European Union. We're the third most affordable in the world. And we want to make sure that food is affordable. I think that is really, really important. But I want to make sure that everybody has access to British food alongside all of that. So I think it's a fine line that we walk, because we all know the price domination, constant downward pressure on all of us.
And absolutely, particularly now. I mean, it is interesting, actually, what is the one thing that always comes back from the industry, because price and margins absolutely crucial for the industry. And that's why, there's a strong free trade element in hospitality in general, not necessarily everywhere, but certainly to buy where they want. And I think there's always a feeling that what's going to happen with trade deals and Brexit will only push up the price of food. Is it only going to push up the price of food?
Look, what's going to push the price of food up is friction. That is what will push the price of food up. So the less friction that we have, and primarily with Europe, we've got to cut out the friction, because friction will add cost. On the whole standards point, we have always been pro a liberalized trade agenda. This is not about a protectionist approach. This is just about saying, look, we've got to have common values here that we abide by. And it's wrongly, in some ways, been tabled against the US as, you have substandard food. We know that there are many states that are producing to the same level of accreditation that we have here. California, in many cases, has gone beyond. So it's perfectly within the art of the possible. And I think many of these roads lead back to health, which is why David Cameron took the decision to drive better use of antibiotics in livestock and in human health. And we've done that. And that has been about keeping healthier animals in a healthier environment. That means you use less antibiotics. Well, that's a win for everybody. And that is what I'm talking about going forwards. It's not about a protectionist view. It's just about saying, look, come on, we've got to do this constructively. We want affordable food, but we want it produced to a sensible set of standards that is not going to undermine the nation's health.
Exactly. I mean, do you think actually with a Biden administration coming in, that you might get a better buy-in around areas like animal welfare, which probably isn't high on the agenda of a Trump administration?
No, it wasn't high on the... Well, climate change was not on the agenda in the Trump administration, end of. And climate change is on the agenda with the Biden administration. And also you've got China now entering the race to net zero. So I do think globally, the UK suddenly becomes in a very good place, because we host the COP here next year. And the way that we produce our food across the world, our investment, remember, in sustainable production of soy and soya and sourcing has been huge. And let's grow that. Let's not just throw all of that away. Let's grow it, and let's provide leadership in this area. And building back, we talk about building back better. The green economy is going to be the way forward, but it needs everybody. It's no good us just talking business to business. It needs all our customer base embracing this opportunity too. That is essential. I think otherwise we just offshore our production and our business.
In terms of building better relationships with hospitality, and I mean, look, I mean, you know, there are people with feet in both camps. Actually, I know people running major
like
brands who actually have farms, like you, indeed. Does there need to be a more formal structure to do that, or is it just a matter of individual businesses getting to know it? How do we, you know, how do we accelerate? If we agree, and I think we probably do, it's a good thing to do. How do we accelerate that?
Look, I do think we need to accelerate it. I honestly believe that the Sector Food Council that I sit on and Kate sits on as well had the mechanism to do it, but it really needs ministerial leadership. So we saw probably the most successful council was the Automotive Council, which was when Lib Dems were in coalition with the Conservatives, and I think it was Vince Cable that chaired it. But that council worked exceptionally well and did what it said it was going to do on the tin. Now, the Sector Food Council is definitely the mechanism, I think, to join up these elusive dots and to allow that enabling environment, if you like, to come together. But at the moment, I still feel that it with everything else going on, this will be the good thing when Brexit concludes, that hopefully we can get back to joined up government and really working on behalf of you know, hospitality, the farmers that I represent, bringing it all together into one business plan, because that is what is needed.
One last point. One of the other areas we have common issue with is immigration policy and labour. We both have that problem. Yours is perhaps, well, seasonal on both counts. Is there something we can do together in that area, do you think?
I think there is. I think it's a really worrying time at the moment. I mean, for the growers that I represent, you know, they've got no idea what the seasonal worker scheme for next year looks like. We know that we need 70,000 workers, and we still don't have an answer on what the global scheme is going to look like or the size of it. So that is very, very concerning when you are obviously planting now, you've got crops that are in the ground and you've got no idea of how they're going to be picked. And we all know that there's going to be a greater demand, and indeed we should be producing much more of our fruit and veg here. That doesn't even touch the sides of the permanent workforce. So we are both reliant on seasonal and permanent workers. And it just feels like, as an employer, don't forget we are larger than cars and aerospace put together, and we are a massively significant employer, 1 in 8 people. So, you know, we do need to have that voice heard. And I think the aspects of trade, the aspects of future workforce and empowering, this is something I feel very passionately about. You know, how do we empower people that are in education at the moment, that there are fantastic jobs on offer in the food and farming sector, the largest manufacturing sector. And that is what I think we also need to join up. And again, the Sector Food Council, Dame Fiona Kendrick has done a lot in that space on future workforce, but that is really needed as well. So collaboration is key as we leave Europe, and we really do have to work much better and much closer together. But I think we start that journey from a very good place with what we've done to date.
Excellent. Well, look, thank you so much for your time today. Really, really great to have you on our virtual conference this year. Perhaps we'll have you in real life next year, or certainly we'll stay in touch. Minette, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's been great. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. And now for our next session, we bring our leaders panel in. Well, we're going to be picking up a lot of those points which Minette has raised to see what reaction we get from our industry, particularly on working together. And I think the issue of getting public opinion on our side. We'll see you all in about a few minutes' time, and make sure you click on the tab for the next session. Thank you, and thank you, Minette, again.
Thanks. Bye-bye.